Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gregory Lafortune. I am a registered dietitian that works with the CEP program. I'm so glad to be with you all today on this CEP Community Live. I did my first one about 6 weeks ago, and I'm glad to be back here. And today's presentation, we are going to talk about something, and we actually did this presentation with my former class. It was cohort 10 and 11. So we did this for the final week, and we're going to talk about sugar and nutritive and non-nutritive sweeteners. It's just going to be a very high level conversation where I'll provide some information about sugar, the effect that it has on the brain, as well as the role of non-nutritive sweeteners, or in other words, artificial sugar, and how that affects the brain as well, and other things that it may do too. So I'm going to share my screen. And if there are questions, I believe there's a chance to ask questions. So I'll
Yeah,
go
if
ahead.
yeah, if
Go
anyone
ahead.
has any questions, please post them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that. Well, we can get to after the presentation.
Okay. I don't have a problem with answering questions throughout either. So however you see it fit, Matt, we can make it work.
Yeah, if you see any
All right.
questions pop up that you want to answer, then go for it. But otherwise, I'll be keeping an eye on it.
Perfect. All right. All right, everyone. So once again, welcome, and let's go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen. All right. So this is all right. So once again, today's presentation is called Intro to Non-Nutritive Sweeteners. And let's go ahead and get started. So non-nutritive sweeteners, as we can see this photo right here, is a topic of hot debate. Should I use them? Should I not use them? And we'll talk about that today. So first, let's understand the concept of sugar and the brain. A lot of times we get this question during our classes, how does sugar affect the brain? Why should I not eat sugar? So let's talk about that a little bit. So first and foremost, we need to know that sugar is needed to provide the brain energy, and carbohydrates are broken down into sugar. So our brains need carbohydrates as fuel. Our brains need sugar as fuel. And according to this slide here, we see that carbohydrates are broken down into sugar. So when we use the word sugar, we need to consider all the sources of sugar. So of course, whenever we think sugar, we always associate it with things that are sweet. We always associate it with candy, pastries, chocolate, sugary beverages, things that have like that sugar inside of it. But also, according to our bodies and how it breaks down carbohydrates, anything that has carbohydrates breaks down into our body as sugar. So this means starchy vegetables like carrots, corn, potatoes. This means any dairy product. This means any type of bread, pasta, rice, any type of grain, quinoa, anything like that gets broken down into our bodies as sugar and is useful for the brain to provide energy to different parts of our bodies as well. Now, of course, we can have the conversation of what are the best sources of carbohydrates, but I wanted to just kind of throw this in there just to begin, just so that we can get our conversation going. So best sources of carbohydrates we know come from our whole grains. We know they come from our starchy vegetables. And of course, we know that the carbohydrates that are not the best for us will come from those sugary beverages, the sweets, things of that nature. So if our bodies don't have enough sugar, particularly our brains, we experience what's called hypoglycemia. I'll just be frank with you. I am a type 1 diabetic. I have type 1 diabetes. And I'll just share a story with you the other day. I woke up, my sugar was low. Apparently, my sugar fell low in the middle of the night. This is called hypoglycemia. And it was very, very strong. How much my head hurt, how much dizziness and fogginess that I experienced. I almost had to lay in bed for the whole day almost because my sugar was low. So this is what happens when we experience hypoglycemia. Our brains are crying out for some source of fuel and some source of energy to the point where we can't think straight. You know, we have an inability to focus. We experience a deep headache or migraine, dizziness and fogginess. So that's what happens when we don't receive enough sugar. Now, too much sugar on the brain is also damaging. We experience what's called inflammation, which can lead to small vessel disease. So this is basically vessels that are bringing blood into the brain, basically get narrowed because of the effect of sugar, to where our brains are not getting the amount of blood that it needs to properly function. It's also can experience brain atrophy or our brains shrinking. There's a joke out there saying, like, if you eat if you eat a lot of sugar, your brain can shrink and you can become less smart. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if that's like a scare tactic used, to children to encourage them not to eat as much sugar. But we can experience brain atrophy, basically a shrinking of the brain with too much sugar. Also, the small vessel disease that I spoke about in the previous bullet point can lead to vascular dementia. So these are just some, like I said, some overall high level things that can happen, when we're talking about the two extremes, not enough sugar and too much sugar. All right. So I just need you all to understand sugar and the brain is important. That connection is needed. We need energy. We won't get that energy from the other macronutrients, from protein and fats. We will primarily get those from sugar. All right. All right. Somebody asked, what about natural sweeteners like stevia and monk fruit? Great question. That's why we are here today. Let's get into it. All right. So let's define some terms. A non-nutritive sweeteners or a non-nutritive sweetener are substances used instead of sugar to sweeten products. So other names for non-nutritive sweeteners also include sugar substitutes, artificial sugars. These are just some common names that you'll hear for non-nutritive sweeteners. And when we think of non-nutritive sweeteners, I want you just to think of something that does not provide the brain with energy, meaning something that does not have actual sugar in it. All right, that's what we describe as a non-nutritive sweetener. A nutritive sweetener is something that has sugar in it, like just plain old sugar. And I don't want you to get nutritive sweetener and a nutritious food conflated either, okay? A nutritive sweetener has sugar in it. A non-nutritive sweetener does not have sugar in it. Let's just define them as basic as simply as that. So let's compare. So sugar, as I just described, provides calories. Examples, you have sucrose, that's your common table sugar. Also find sucrose in candy, milkshakes, honey. You have galactose, that's sugar that derives typically from dairy products. So you'll find that in cheese, yogurt. You'll also find it in kiwi fruit and in some types of dried fruit as well. You have fructose. This is sugar from fruit. So this is like agave, honey, corn syrup. These provide calories, and if eaten, these will cause an elevation in blood glucose. And I know I'm talking about sugar from the brain's perspective, as far as getting too much sugar, how that can damage the brain, or too little of sugar can really also damage the brain as well. It can cause like that dizziness and fogginess. Sugar has an effect on our bodies as well, how our bodies provide us insulin in order to regulate that sugar that comes into our body. So that's another conversation, but simply because we typically talk about topics that relate to the brain, that's why I'm limiting it to that today. So that's regular sugar. So that's what we consider a nutritive sweetener. Now, comparing that to an artificial sugar, which is a non-nutritive sweetener, we see that these provide little to no calories. And here are some examples. We see aspartame, which is a very common one. That's the name, but the household names are Equal, NutraSweet, Saccharin, for example, typically referred to as Sweet and Low, Sucralose, Splenda, Stevia, which is called Truvia or Sweet Leaf. We see these brands out in the market. Monk Fruit is another one. Advantame, Neotame is another one that I did not put on here. Now, these artificial sugars are 200 to 20,000 times sweeter than regular sugar and do not provide the same energy that regular sugar does. Remember, regular sugar provides energy to the brain. Of course, too much or too little has an effect, but artificial sugar, according to the taste profiles of them, they are 200 to 20,000 times sweeter than regular sugar, but do not contain the same energy benefits that regular sugar has. That's very important to know. Meaning that if I were to take let's take a tablespoon of regular sugar and a tablespoon of an artificial sugar, those two sugars have a different sweetness level, where that regular sugar obviously is sweet, but that artificial sugar will be 200 to 20,000 times sweeter according to the taste in comparison to that regular sugar. Very important to know. And let's look at this chart right here, because this kind of gives us a general overview of some of the main types of sugar artificial sweeteners, that I mentioned in the last slide. So we see saccharin right here, and we'll just kind of go through them as needed. So saccharin, like I said, it's called Sweet and Low, also called Sweet Twin, Nectar Sweet, 200 to 700 times as sweet as table sugar. Sorry. So the natural or artificial caloric content, no calories. So somebody who likes Sweet and Low, let's say, for example, like all these products really are typically like advertised to people who have to keep their blood sugars regulated or who are trying to watch for their weight. That's probably the top two reasons why somebody would use an artificial sugar. It's very rare that people like artificial sugars more than regular sugar, but those two reasons are commonly associated with using artificial sugar. Aspartame, NutraSweet equals Sugar Twin, 160 to 220 times sweeter as table sugar. Once again, artificial, no calorie. It says here that aspartame, you have to watch out for people with rare genetic conditions like PKU. Aspartame cannot be properly processed by the body, and therefore it must carry an FDA warning label. So as you can see, just look at this different list here, or just look at this list here. This chart here just kind of gives you a general overview of different types of non-nutritive sweeteners, their sweetness level, and the effect that they can have on the body. For example, we see sucralose. It's suitable for cooking and baking. It is 600 times as sweet as regular table sugar. That's sucralose Splenda. So we see familiar names, brand names that we use, that are artificial sugars. Now, sorbitol, mannitol, and xylitol, these last three, as we see, everything else is in the hundreds when it comes to the number of times, as sweet as table sugar. But these last three actually are way less sweet than regular table sugar. And I'm so sorry, real quick. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm so sorry about that. Can you all still see my screen?
Yep, we can still see.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I stopped at sorbitol, mannitol, and xylitol. So These three are referred to as sugar alcohols. So whenever you see something has a sugar alcohol in it, typically it's your sorbitol, your mannitol, and your xylitol. These actually are less sweet than normal table sugar. So we typically see associations with people using more of these products into their beverages or whatever they sweeten their products with because of the fact that they are less sweet, or as xylitol is just as sweet as normal table sugar. Does that make sense? So typically you'll see somebody use a lot less stevia, which is 300 times as sweet as table sugar, than you would see somebody use sorbitol, which is 0.5 to 0.7 as sweet as regular table sugar. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please let me know. All right. So with these sugar alcohols, if you see the other notable effects, you'll notice that they all have a laxative effect if recommended doses are exceeded. Now, this is very important because this is when we start seeing, these type of like digestive, I don't want to say complications, but effects of these products. People report having, eating sorbitol, mannitol, or xylitol and having diarrhea after, because, it has that lactative effect. And because it's less sweet as normal table sugar, people typically exceed the recommended dosage and have those types of complications due to their consumption. All right. We'll refer back to this chart if we need to, but I just wanted to kind of give you a general overview of the different types of artificial sugars and sweeteners that are typically used. And like I said, there are others, but that's kind of what it is. So somebody asked me in the chart, somebody asked me about the natural sugars. So we see stevia and monk fruit are, the two that are typically associated with being natural sugars because those two literally come from plants. But the fact of the matter is they still kind of like do the same thing, to be honest with you. They still provide sweetness. They still are however many times as sweet as normal table sugar. And we'll talk about why that's important. I know I'm referring to that a lot. So of course, if I were to tell you to choose one, I tell you to go for like a stevia or go for like a monk fruit, unless you're like recommended otherwise by your doctor. But ultimately, they all kind of fall within the same category as far as like being many times as sweet as normal table sugar and not being like, a nutritive sweetener, not giving you calories, not giving you energy. So why do people consume them? I mean, for what? Well, one, less calories, which helps with weight control. When it comes to gaining weight or losing weight, if you consume at a calorie level that exceeds your basic metabolic rate, you will gain weight. If you consume calories that fall under your BMR, you will lose weight. So finding out that you can eat non-nutritive sweeteners kind of helps you see that, okay, non-nutritive sweeteners have less calories. So you can see that it leads to weight loss. That's what a lot of reports say. That's why a lot of people generally use them. Less sugar. So for somebody that has diabetes, you can help control your blood sugar using a non-nutritive sweetener because it does not have the calories that regular sugar has, in turn helping you keep your blood sugars in normal range. So limits tooth decay. So we see and we know that because of sugar, we see a lot of like problems with teeth that can occur, dental caries, cavities, all that good stuff. So if you're consuming a non-nutritive sweetener, it kind of helps you mitigate those effects that it can have on your teeth, or at least those negative effects. And taste. Surprisingly, some people like the fact that they can mimic sugar sweetness without the negative effects of that sugar. So that's non-nutritive. That's nutritive sweeteners. I'm sorry. That's why people consume artificial sweeteners. So downsides. One is that they may confuse the brain. All right. So the brain gets a false sense of satiety. So the word satiety means fullness. So let's think about it. The brain primary energy source is sugar. Imagine you eating something that tastes very sweet. Well, a non-nutritive sweetener or an artificial sugar tastes very sweet. Research shows that this may send a false signal to the brain that you're eating something that can provide energy, but in reality, you're not. So the brain realizes that this does not really have energy in it because there's no calories in it, causing you to still crave sweet things and potentially overeat, as that second bullet point says, increase appetite and binge eating. So there's a connection there. The brain is tricked to think that it's eating something sweet, it's having something sweet, but really it's not. And actually, what research also shows too is that when we consume non-nutritive sweeteners, because of their flavor profile, how many times sweeter than they are than regular sugar, research shows that our brains can become desensitized to normal sugar, which causes us to want more and more regular sugar. So even though a non-nutritive sweetener or an artificial sugar does not have the calories, that a normal, something that has sugar does, it can cause you to actually still crave that thing, which can cause all the negative effects of just regular eating that regular sugar. All right. And that's why I put that it's still associated with diabetes and weight gain, because obviously if you still crave something, let's say for example you're hanging out at home and you have like a artificially flavored drink, and you consume that. Let's say for example it's like a sugar alcohol, like a mannitol or a sorbitol, something that has one of those in them. All right, we saw before, it's not as sweet as regular sugar. Let's say you drink that, and then after you're just like, I'm still thirsty. I want something sweet. I want something that's gonna give me energy. So now you just drink a artificially flavored drink. Now you're going for something that actually has sugar in it. So you can see how that can lead to overeating. So that I just wanted to throw that example out there. So it also may negatively affect the gut microbiome. This is something, so inside of our gut exists microbiota that help us in so many different types of ways. And these are actually beneficial bacteria that can really help, help with a lot of processes that go on in our body, like how we metabolize food, how we metabolize medication, all these good types of things. So what studies show is that artificial sugar may actually in turn cause toxicity inside of our gut microbiomes, causing us not to experience life the same way that we would if we had a healthy gut microbiome. So basically it would take healthy bacteria in our guts and basically turn them into bad bacteria, making it hard for a lot of processes that normally occur to be able to occur effectively. And of course, like I said before, they may cause digestive comfort, having a laxative effect. So these are some of the downsides of their use. So with that being said, and my slide is done here, if I were to provide like any type of recommendation on the use of artificial sugar, the science says that using them sparingly is hard because it leads to overeating. It leads to all of these types of things. But it really just depends on who you are. And people have different types of sensitivities to them as well. If you are somebody that has diabetes, you should, everybody should be drinking water, not just people with diabetes, but everybody should be drinking water as their primary source of hydration. That's honestly the prime source of hydration. Everything else is not really truly providing, true hydration. So of course, drink water. I would say if you want to include a non-nutritive sweetener, I know something that I do personally. Let's say, for example, I've been drinking water and like I just want a nice, like something that has just a little kick of sweetness to it. I would take like a cup of water, I'd squeeze like some lemon or some lime in there, and I'd add like 2 drops of stevia just to give me a little bit of sweetness. I wouldn't like bombard the drink with a non-nutritive sweetener, but it kind of gives me that satisfaction of having something sweet without it really being sweet. So there are methods of using them. I would just say, just be very careful, consult with your doctor. Don't abuse them because they're shown to increase your appetite and to give you a deeper craving of actual sugar. So that's something to really be careful for. And if you are somebody that can't really control that, then I would definitely just say, you might want to like stay away from them as much as possible, but it really just does depend on the person. So that's what I wanted to present to you all today. And, if there are any questions, I am ready for them.
Yeah, so thanks. So let's take a look at the questions. So Greg, you kind of touched on this, but what exactly causes like the laxative effects in some of those artificial sweeteners?
Very
Like,
good question. Yeah.
yeah, like do you know why is it that sweeteners do that?
Yes, very good question. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. So we know that the brain or our bodies typically digest and accept three main, what we call macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So these things go through different types of processes to be used by the body for different types of reasons. And of course, we can talk about like vitamins and minerals, but that's another conversation. So those three things, carbs, fats, and proteins. So being that non-nutritive sweeteners have neither, they go straight through our bodies and are not digested, which causes a laxative effect. It's almost like a fiber, but I'm not going to put it in the same category as fiber because fiber is definitely beneficial. It definitely helps with a lot of processes. But I want to compare fiber and a xylitol or something, in the sense of digestion. Like the body, you consume it, it goes straight through your digestive system, doesn't get used effectively, so it comes out in laxative form. So that's why that effect happens, because it's neither a carb, it's neither a fat, it's neither a protein, and it cannot be digested properly by the digestive system.
Okay. We also got a question about monk fruit, about how much sweeter monk fruit is. Is it one of those like it's about the same sweetness as sugar, or is it more, or is it off the charts like neotame or one of those other?
So monk fruit, I don't know if, I guess I didn't have it up here. Yeah, I didn't have monk fruit up here. I don't know exactly how many times as sweet, but it's in the hundreds. Um, but once again, monk fruit is definitely more of a natural sugar that comes from plants. And of course, we're in an age right now where everything is promoting plant-based. And of course, we should eat more plant-based, obviously. So, it's still 100 something times as sweet as normal table sugar. And, it still doesn't taste the same as sugar. So you should, still be mindful of that. And, it's not like vegan sugar or no, it's nothing like that. So you should still be very cautious, and it could still have some of those same negative effects as well, like still causing you to desire more sugar, still causing you to not feel satisfied by what you eat. It can still have those same effects.
Yeah. How does honey figure into these different sweeteners? Like what kind of sugar or sweetener is in honey?
So when it comes to honey, so honey is not an artificial sugar at all. Honey is an actual sugar. Remember, artificial sugars are non-nutritive sweeteners, and regular sugar is a nutritive sweetener. So the fact that somebody may use honey doesn't really mean anything to the body when it comes to digestion. All sugar is going to be sugar. So you using honey is really not the same as you using regular table sugar, to be honest with you. The only difference may start to come depending on, I don't know the proper term for it, but sometimes, okay, honey's made with molasses, or there's molasses in honey. Table sugar is more processed than honey, I would say, especially when it comes to the source of honey. So if you see like particles at the bottom of your honey, or if you see like, blackstrap molasses, for example, those are more like natural forms of sugar in comparison to table sugar that may have more nutrients inside of them in a when we're comparing that to regular table sugar, I'm sorry, my tongue is tied. I don't know why. So still, the body recognizes it as sugar. So you still may get more nutrients from that honey. So if I were to choose one, I would choose honey, but still, it will still drive your blood sugar bananas. It will still add calories that you may not need, depending on who you are. So it still gets metabolized the same way as normal table sugar does, but still can have potentially more nutrients in it.
So that kind of leads into another question. So on this chart, honey is under the fructose category. So when someone talks about high fructose corn syrup, like what does that mean versus other types of fructose products, I guess you could say?
Very, very great question. So let's take fruit, for example. So most fruit, as you know it, has fructose as its sugar. All right. So the way you can remember that, fructose, F-R-U, F-R-U. All right. So regular fruit has fructose in it. Let's take, what's one of my favorite fruit? Blackberries are one of my favorite fruit. I'll compare a blackberry versus something that has high fructose corn syrup, like a pastry. So with that blackberry, you will find that it has fiber. It has what we call anthocyanins, which are very dark pigmented antioxidants, which can help with so many different types of processes in our body, help protect us from disease and all that good stuff. So there's a lot of things associated with that fructose. Now, let's compare that to like a pastry, like a donut or something that may have like a high corn fructose syrup, or I'm sorry, like a cup of juice. That's something very common that has high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is taking fructose. It's like fructose on steroids, basically. It's highly processed. And typically you will find that things that have high fructose corn syrup don't have other beneficial nutrients in them. So if I eat some blueberries that have just naturally occurring sugar in them, non-processed sugar, you'll see that it has other nutrients as well that can help mitigate the effects that sugar can have on my body. But when I eat or drink a cup of juice, I mean, it really doesn't depend on the brand. A lot of them have high fructose corn syrup. It's literally just sugar and nothing else, like nothing else at all. No fiber in it that can help slow down the effects of the sugar. No types of no types of vitamins in it to help kind of like promote skin health. Nothing else but sugar. So that's what I would say the difference is.
So you mentioned that so if someone asks, is high fructose, is it used by the muscles or the brain, or is it not? So because you're saying it doesn't have those other kind of qualities to it, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So the question is
it true that high fructose is not used by muscles or brain and only gets processed by the liver?
I'm not too sure on that. Just to be quite honest with you, I don't want to just tell you something. So I'm not quite sure, but I mean, what I do know though, like it's literally just sugar. Literally just sugar. Like imagine you just taking a cup of sugar, and 1 gram is equivalent to I think 3 teaspoons or tablespoons. So every time you see a gram, imagine you taking like 2 or 3 tablespoons. It's teaspoons or tablespoons. I'm sorry, I should know, but it's one of them. So per gram, it's that. Imagine you, like after you see it, imagine you just drinking it. That's literally what it is when it comes to sugar. So we know that can cause stomach discomfort. Some people's stomach hurt when they eat a lot of sugar. Some people, obviously, our blood sugars are going to go up, meaning our insulin is going to go up, which can lead to insulin sensitivity problems. So there's a lot of things associated with that. But as far as like how it gets converted and processed, I'm sorry, I don't quite know that in specificity.
Okay. Just kind of skimming through some other questions that we have. Someone had a comment, and I just want to clarify something. Greg, when you're saying that the relationship between honey and molasses, did you mean like artificial honey?
Um, well, what do you mean? I'm sorry.
Like honey, like from a honeycomb versus like artificial honey. Is that what you were meant by? I think you said something along the lines of honey and molasses were related.
Well, I guess I was thinking of them inconsistency wise. Like they
Mhm.
both kind of like have the same consistency. And we typically people generally refer to them as like better for you because they come from bees or we typically know like honey as like a more healthy sweetener. So I put them in the same category based off of the notion that they're associated with like being better for you.
Got it.
Yeah.
So we did have, I think that kind of covered. Oh, we have some other things in Q&A. How about maple syrup? Like, is maple syrup kind of in the same category as honey, or is that like a different sweetener?
Yeah, it's still all in the same category. Like I want you all to think about sugar, no matter what the source of it is, literally the body takes it and does the exact same thing with it, all of them. Like the reason why you hear that this sugar is better than this sugar, it may be true, but it's not very true by a large margin. There just may be very like minuscule details that may make a blackstrap molasses more healthy than a plain white table sugar. um Obviously it's darker in color, meaning that like it's less processed, meaning that the potential for it to have more nutrients is increased, in opposition to a table sugar that's extremely processed. All the nutrients, everything is extracted, all the everything. But when it gets to the body, when it gets past our esophagus into our stomach, literally the body does the same exact thing with it, uses it for energy. What it uses. What it doesn't need, it will extract, causing our blood sugars to go up and just causing a whole bunch of things to happen. So that's what I would say to that.
Um,
I don't know if that was clear.
yeah. Someone also had a question that they do you know if aspartame has been associated with causing headaches?
I haven't seen that aspartame was. But what I have seen though is that any of them can cause any type of reaction. There's a lot of different types of reaction other than the laxative effects that people have noticed with consumption of these artificial sweeteners, headaches being one of them as well, dizziness, headaches, of course, like the whole like laxative type of effect. There's a lot of things that people notice, but as far as like very specific about aspartame, I haven't quite seen that. All I know is that aspartame, it's not very good for people that have PKU, which is a type of protein converting disease, is a genetic disorder. And aspartame basically is not good for that. But as far as like headaches, it's very possible.
Um, we did have a couple comments just on fruit drinks often not having fruit juice in them and a lot of extra sugar. I know that's something that I've heard Margot talk a lot about.
Yes, yes. A lot of people, for example, will, they'll go on juice diets or, juicing is cool. If you want to juice, if you have a juicer, you want to make your juice, that's perfectly fine. But keep in mind that um, juicing typically extracts a lot of fiber. It'll leave like a lot of the vitamins in there, but it extracts the fiber. So it touches your digestive system. There's no fiber to help kind of slow down the digestion of that sugar, which can cause spikes in blood sugar. So you just want to be careful for that. But ultimately, like juicing is cool. It's perfectly fine. Somebody said, I'm also reading too, Matt.
Mhm.
Um, I want to get to all of them. Somebody said those, yeah, you read that one, the not fruit juice, yes. Somebody said Manuka honey has a lot of antibiotics and considered good for you. Yes, very true. A lot of those sweeteners do carry antibiotic properties. They also, like I said, they carry, a lot of different like vitamins and beneficial properties, but still it touches your digestive system and it's sugar. And too much consumption of it will be beneficial no matter, I'm sorry, too much consumption of it will negatively impact your body no matter how many antibiotics there are in there. So just keep that in mind. Welch's Concord grape juice, that's pure sugar, pure sugar. So, it's still, and I want to be very sensitive when I say that. When I say pure sugar, you have to understand, I'm just saying that once it touches your digestive system, your insulin levels will go up, your blood sugar will go up. That's what I mean. But, we know that it can have like vitamin A, vitamin C, like fruit juices typically have those types of vitamins, but still, too much consumption can be a problem. Somebody said, thanks so much for the info, but the elephant in the room is that the food industry, FDA, has the deck stacked against the consumer. Any thoughts? Tons of thoughts, tons of thoughts about that. There are like acceptable limits for each nutritive sweetener that the FDA recommends. Some people have very strong opinions about that. Some people don't really care and just kind of follow that. From what I've noticed, I've seen that the limits that the FDA has on some of these non-nutritive sweeteners typically fall in the range that people typically don't use them. It'll be like 20 packets a day or something like that. And I hope, you know, I hope that, people are not using 20 packets a day of a non-nutritive sweetener or something, but more so using it sparingly, occasionally if they want to add sweetness to whatever they want. But yeah, the FDA, a lot of people have a problem with those recommendations that they make, but everybody's entitled to their own opinions. All we know is that we see what the information provides, so we just have to make what choice is best for us and our personal situation in order to optimize our health.
So we got another question. This kind of ties back to a comment that we got earlier in the hour. And it's slightly off topic, but you kind of talked about it earlier. Do you have any pointers for anyone that has type 1 diabetes? And earlier we had a question/comment on monitoring your blood sugar levels. Any tips on that as well?
Yes, great question. I've had type 1 for since 2004. So going on 18 years now, I've had type 1. I've found that what works is making sure I check my sugar frequently, making sure I take my insulin before I eat, not after I eat, or if it is after I eat, right after I eat, because that sugar has already started accumulating in my body. And because I don't have insulin in my system, it's going to cause a spike in my sugar. And the more quickly I can take my insulin to help combat that, the better it is for those spikes. If you are somebody that likes to, like, I love sweets so much, and it's because all my life I've been told that I can't have them. So I love sweets, and I've seen them have very negative effects on me. So something that I may do, let's say for example, I want a sweet drink. Like I gave you the example earlier, I would take some water, squeeze some, some lemon or some, orange in there and add a couple of drops of stevia, call it a wrap. I get that sweetness that I want. Something else that I may do is that I may use like a 75-25 approach where 75% of my drink is going to be water, 25% of it might be that Concord grape juice, just to kind of give me that sweetness. And a lot of times you'll be surprised, especially with like a lot of those grape juices out there. 25-75 actually works, because sometimes those things are so sweet they burn your throat. So yeah, that's just a random thought, but just finding ways like that to just to control your sugar you got to be very creative and just know what's best for you. Ultimately, it's water. I don't have any CGM. I wish I did. I I I got diabetes when they were first coming out. I was 7 years old, and I was so opposed to them. And now looking back, I regret that I was so opposed to them because my life is so busy right now. I really wish that I used a CGM and a insulin pump. I really wish I had one, but I will get one eventually.
I also had a question. Do you know anything about how much sugar is in Ensure?
And sugar?
In Ensure, like Ensure, the
Good
drug.
question. I think it's around 20. There's different types of Ensure, so you have to specify. You have Ensure Max, Ensure Max Protein. You have Glucerna, which is the one with the least amount of sugar. Yeah, but I would say the best bang for your buck when it comes to Ensure to really help like balance the sugar is going to be the Ensure High Protein. The reason why is because it has high protein and it has very similarly the same amount of sugar as a Glucerna, which is the low sugar Ensure, but it gives you a lot more protein. So it's helping you kind of like balance out the effect of that carbohydrate or that sugar. So I don't know exactly, but I think regular Ensure has around 20 grams, maybe 16. I'm not quite sure.
So someone had a question about a CGM, aka a continuous glucose monitor. They're just asking what that is. So yeah, it's just a way of monitoring your glucose
Yes.
continuously rather than
Finger
one
pricking.
test at
Yeah.
a time.
Correct. So you basically wear it. Most people wear it like on the back of their arm, like on their tricep area, and basically it's synced to their phone. It's just a very technologically advanced way of monitoring blood sugar. The most accurate way is definitely still doing the finger prick because that CGM uses a certain part of blood flow to access that reading that's not as accurate as a finger prick. So your most accurate will be that finger prick, but that CGM will still be very accurate as well, like in the ballpark of what your sugar is.
Let's see any other questions coming up. Oh, here's another one. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you just saw this question because I've heard of this too. If you consume grapefruit or melon or something else before you have something that's high in sugar, will it counter the effect?
I've heard that. I don't have enough research on it to give a definitive answer. So I'm so sorry. I can't give you a straight up answer to that. But I've heard that as well. I don't know how true it is because grapefruit, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of sugar. It might be something in that grapefruit that can help combat it. But I'm not quite sure.
Okay. We also had a question: how much sugar should you consume in a day? I also have a follow up to this. Is that what for how much sugar would you recommend for like the average person? And then also kind of bringing this back to the CEP program, for people that maybe um, seeing like some cognitive difficulty going forward, and I know that you guys have talked a lot about the mind diet. How does sugar play into that? Like how much sugar should we kind of consume per day, and for people not in kind of that category, how much sugar would you recommend on a daily basis?
Yeah. Most sugar recommendations that are published more so refer to added sugar. So another thing to differentiate. So you'll see on a nutrition label, typically you'll see grams of sugar and then you'll see added sugar or additional or sugar added, right? So you really want to be careful for things that have added sugar into them, meaning that these products already have sugar, but then more sugar is added to the process in the case or for the reason of preservation or to add sweetness. That's really what you want to be careful. And a lot of times you'll see those in, for example, like yogurt. Yogurt might have natural sugar in it, it does, but then you'll see like sugar added, you'll see however many grams. So that's really what you want to be careful for. And most recommendations for added sugar is no more than 20 grams of added sugar per day. And when I tell you that's hard, you'll notice how easily you can get added sugar into your diet. And the reason why added sugar is more of the concern is because we don't want to tell people, or we don't want to completely eliminate sugar per se, to be honest with you, because fruit is one of the most nutrient dense foods. We can't say don't eat fruit because it has sugar. No, there's tons of benefits of fruits that outweigh the sugar. So with the fruits, you have completely natural sugar, no added sugar. But with a fruit juice, you have added sugar. So you just want to make those differentiations. And typically it's around 20 grams, no more than 20 grams of added sugar per day. And I think sometimes it gets tricky, or sometimes these food labels, they really try to get you in some ways, because typically you'll see on a nutrition label everything based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. You'll see the percentages of that same product of what you're looking at, how much it contributes to your daily 2,000 calories. For example, you'll see protein. It could be let's say it's like a piece of chicken. It'll say like one serving of chicken has 20% of your daily protein needs a day based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. Whenever you look at sugar, I want you to be careful. You'll see that typically nothing is listed. Why? Because sometimes those things have so much sugar that if they were to be honest on how much that contributes to your daily percentage of recommended sugar, it'll say like 100 or 150, or sometimes like 500 I've seen, or I've done the calculation in my math on. So you want to be very careful on that. They get very deceptive with those labels. So just make sure it's not added sugar that you're overdoing. Yes, trying to limit to 20 grams of added sugar a day is very hard. I know it is, Rod. It's hard for me too. But that is the recommendation. But it's not calculating fruit and other natural sugars into that calculation. So just keep that in mind too. Yes, Weight Watchers teaches us that eating fruit is always better than drinking the juice of that fruit. Absolutely. You get more nutrients from eating an apple than you will drinking apple juice 100 times any day.
So someone had a question just about how to read the nutritional label. So if the label says total sugar 15 grams, and then underneath it says 15 grams of added sugar, does that mean that it's actually 30 grams of total sugar? Or is it saying all of the sugar is added sugar?
Bingo. All of the sugar is added sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's obviously a product. I could probably tell you what that is. It's probably some kind of candy or some kind of juice or some kind of like very sweet, non-nutritious food that has it, that all of the sugar in it is added sugar. So things like that, we just want to be careful for. So the 20 grams that it's saying to stay in, that's 15 grams of it right there. You only got 5 left for the day. Good luck.
Okay, so we are a little bit past 4 o'clock, so I'm going to take the last question, and this is again kind of going back to slightly off topic, but just going back to the type 1, is that if you had to, what do you use to bring your low sugar up fast, other than orange juice or peanut butter?
I wouldn't recommend peanut butter. When your blood sugar is low, you need straight up sugar. So that's why they typically would recommend some kind of glucose tablet, something that has pure sugar in it. So that's why somebody with type 1, you'll regularly see them having something sweet because they need to balance their blood sugar, right? So peanut butter, it has sugar in it, but it also has fat and protein in it. That fat and protein will cause a very much slower increase in your blood sugar than something like an orange juice would. So if you're somebody that has type 1 and you're trying to bring your sugar up quickly, orange juice is the typical one, but even candy, for example, might not be like able to bring your sugar up as fast as an orange juice, because that orange juice has nothing but sugar, as I just said earlier. And also something like candy has fat in it. Fat is going to help, not help, but fat slows down how much or how quickly sugar can get into your system. So just go for a juice, something that's very easy, something, if you have a piece of candy or something like that, something that has nothing but sugar is the best way to bring your sugar up.
Okay. Since we are a little over half time, I think I'm going to have to call it here. Thank you for the great presentation, and thank you everyone for the great questions and the great discussion. This was awesome. I want to thank everyone for coming, and let me look up really quick who's going to be with us next week. On the schedule, we have functional independence. So we're going to be joined by Maureen and or Tracy, and they usually have lots of great tips on how to either modify your home or how to make things easier in your home. And yeah, so please come check that out. And yeah, so I want to thank everyone for coming, and see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great one.